it's not a conversation that I would necessarily have. I think it's perfectly true that it is a moment where you need to have that discussion.
The thick and suffocating darkness enveloped the long, cold corridor leading down to the deep royal jewelry storage vault beneath Buckingham Palace. This underground place housed the absolute symbolic treasures of the monarchy, historic pieces strictly forbidden to be touched without the official presence of the true bloodline members of the dynasty. But tonight, that sacred boundary was being trampled in total silence. Camilla sneaked hurriedly across the freezing marble floor, her steps hushed, closely followed by her biological daughter, Laura Lopes. The stepdaughter was desperately seeking to loot this massive family fortune to cover up astronomical debts arising from the dark underworld. Stopping abruptly before the heavily reinforced steel door of the central security zone, Camilla pulled out a designated high-security alloy key from her inner pocket. The heavy-duty mechanical lock rotated with a dull metallic sound, and the steel door swung open slowly, revealing the central display cabinet lined with rich black velvet. Under the dim sensor lights lay the priceless Belgian Sapphire Collection, a sacred wedding gift bestowed by King George VI to the late Queen Elizabeth II in 1947. This material wealth carried the weight of an entire royal era, something Camilla yearned to usurp to completely eradicate the shadow of her late mother-in-law while simultaneously turning it into dirty money for her daughter's desperate financial rescue. Laura's bloodshot eyes locked onto the dazzling necklace, her hands trembling with sheer greed and anticipation. Without a single moment of hesitation, Camilla shoved aside the protective thick glass casing, personally lifting the heavy white gold treasure and dropping it straight into her daughter's gaping designer handbag. Instantly, Laura reached deep into her winter coat, pulling out an incredibly sophisticated replica set. These cheap artificial glass stones were expertly cut to mimic the original deep blue hue, but deep inside there was only a lifeless, hollow layer of cheap industrial material. She carefully placed the fake necklace onto the velvet pedestal, meticulously arranging every single fold of the white chain to deceive the eye of any regular palace guard. A filthy and brazen switch was complete. Camilla zipped up the handbag, smirking in absolute triumph. With the royal sealed, she was completely certain no one would ever dare demand a close inspection of the jewelry. The mother and daughter tightly gripped the bag containing the royal treasure, hastily retreating back into the darkness, taking the massive heritage away from the palace without knowing that this crime had just ignited a ruthless hunt. A week after the incident in the Dark Vault, the Autumn Royal Art Tribute Gala officially took place in ultimate luxury and extravagance. The Grand Hall of Buckingham Palace was completely flooded with brilliant light from dozens of giant crystal chandeliers suspended from the high-carved ceiling. The guests were all elite figures, international dignitaries and aristocrats draped in expensive evening gowns, holding sparkling glasses of expensive champagne. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the central podium where Camilla stood proudly with an arrogant posture. Atop her head, the Belgian sapphire tiara sparkled blindingly, catching every beam of light in the room. She was blatantly usurping the symbolic image of the late queen, deeply relishing the fake adoration and fawning compliments from the crowd below. Every nod, every single bestowed smile of hers exuded the supreme arrogance of someone who believed she had everything completely in her grasp. Right in the middle of the hall, placed in the most solemn and prominent position, was a magnificent tempered glass cabinet lined with deep red velvet. Inside, the fake sapphire necklace and matching earrings were publicly displayed beneath a heavy brass plaque acknowledging the Queen's great legacy. Dozens of aristocratic guests walked by slowly, paused, and offered high words of awe at the beauty of the royal heritage. Not a single one of them realized they were bowing their heads and paying respect to a pile of cheap artificial glass. Standing not far from the display cabinet, Laura Lopes held a glass of red wine, smiling flirtatiously at the surrounding high society men. She wore a daringly cut silk dress, her eyes constantly darting between the glass cabinet and the marveling guests, savoring this spectacular deception with absolute malice. Laura looked at those admiring the pile of glass with absolute mockery and internal triumph, knowing that the Real treasure was currently sitting securely in a secret metal refinery in the industrial suburbs, waiting to be crushed into broken fragments to pump massive cash into her thirsting bank account. Amidst the stifling atmosphere of expensive perfumes and deceitful flattery, Princess entered the grand hall. Her steps were incredibly firm, her rhythm steady, and her upright posture heavily bore an unshakable iron discipline. Unlike the fawning guests, Anne's face bore absolutely no superfluous emotion. Her eyes were cold, sharp as a surgical scalpel scanning the noisy and superficial crowd. She had been the one constantly by the late Queen's side throughout those long years, especially during her difficult final moments on this earth, and had touched the original sapphire necklace countless times throughout her life, personally fastening the heavy white gold clasp around her mother's neck for grand state events. To her, those historic jewels were not just inanimate precious stones, they were flesh and blood, a sacred keepsake of her mother, an absolute pure heritage that could never be allowed to be tainted by outsiders. And walked slowly toward the display cabinet, the guests automatically making way upon seeing her majestic and intimidating presence. She stopped right in front of it, her hands clasped tightly behind her back, leaning in slightly to look closely at the largest central stone of the necklace. The high-intensity chandelier light poured straight down onto the sapphire pendant, penetrating the clear glass. Anne's keen eyes narrowed instantly. Instead of drawing the light deep into the core of the stone and reflecting a deep, brilliant, and multidimensional oceanic blue, the stone before her reacted completely differently. It flashed a cloudy, shallow, and pale streak of light that looked entirely artificial. The surface of the fake gem reflected the ambient light crudely, and worse still, right at the very edge of the central facet, there was an extremely small refractive flaw, a microscopic scratch characteristic of molded cheap glass. This was something only those who truly understood and memorized every physical detail of the original piece could ever detect. It was a lifeless block of cheap matter. Her mother's real jewelry never bore such a dead, artificial light. Anne's hands, still clasped behind her back, clenched tightly into fists, her nails digging deep into her palms. She did not utter a single word of surprise, did not frown, nor did she reveal any anger on her face to alert the traders, and slowly stood up straight, sweeping her razor-sharp gaze through the crowd, aiming straight at Laura Lopes, who was standing caressing her wine glass in the far corner of the room, and then she slowly shifted her vision up to the high podium where Camilla stood majestically. She turned her head slightly to the left wing of the grand hall. Princess Kate stood silently there, her emerald green body-hugging dress perfectly fitting her elegant figure, her eyes delicately observing every single movement of the royal figures. And met Kate's eyes through dozens of silhouettes, and an incredibly subtle, decisive, and cold nod was given by the Princess Royal. Kate instantly understood the hidden message completely. No legal documents, no formal meetings, no words were needed between them. The true bloodline faction had officially confirmed the crime, and the private hunt for the filthy parasites inside the palace had begun. Exactly at 3 o'clock in the morning, Buckingham Palace was submerged in a silence so deep that one could clearly hear the cold autumn wind whistling through the giant carved wooden window frames. All the noisy chatter, the hypocritical flattery, and the superficial clinking of crystal glasses from the grand banquet had died down long ago, leaving behind an eerie and dark atmosphere. The heavy carved oak door of the central exhibition hall opened just enough to leave a narrow gap, and through it, Princess and Princess Kate glided inside silently, their dark wool cloaks completely concealing their figures and blending them seamlessly into the thick night. There was absolutely no time left for vague speculations, nor was there any room for baseless accusations. To unmask the greedy usurpers currently wearing the crown, they needed absolute, irrefutable physical evidence that could not be distorted by political power or deceitful words. Approaching the display cabinet that sat completely isolated in the exact middle of the grand hall, Kate pulled out a compact, matte black metal device from her inner coat pocket, which was a mini UV spectrometer. a highly specialized tool that could never be deceived in the elite diamond and gem appraisal world because it produced a light that stripped away all physical falsehoods instantly. She did not turn on any of the room's main lights, only using the faint silver glow from the window to position herself correctly before bringing the advanced device close to the reinforced glass casing. Her thumb pressed hard on the power switch, and an intense ultraviolet beam radiating a brilliant purple hue immediately shot through the clear glass, enveloping the entire surface of the dazzling necklace resting on the velvet pedestal. The digital screen mounted on the device instantly began to analyze the reflected material structure, but instead of displaying the natural absorption spectrum of corundum, which is the core physical-chemical sign of thousands of years of natural crystallization that makes up a real sapphire, the device began to vibrate softly in her hand. The screen flashed continuously with a blinding orange warning light, signaling a major material anomaly, and a second later, razor-sharp, glowing red digital text appeared clearly in the darkness, showing the words glass and cubic zirconia, confirming it was artificial glass, a total counterfeit, and indisputable physical evidence of a heist. The purple light had stripped bare the filthy truth of the switch, and then stared fixedly at the text on the screen, her eyes flashing with a dangerous flame of ultimate fury. The greatest heritage of the dynasty, her mother's most sacred keepsake, had been brazenly siphoned off right under their noses, right in this very house, and the betrayal came not from an outside thief, but from the very hands of the ambitious woman sleeping in the king's bed. But a sudden, loud outburst of anger wouldn't solve the core issue, as the thieves had to be caught red-handed with the actual goods in their possession, giving them absolutely no chance to destroy the loot or deny their crimes. Kate put the spectrometer back into her pocket and pulled out a roll of specialized forensic lifting tape, a super adhesive, flexible chemical film used by high-level investigators to extract surface fingerprints with absolute dexterity, caution, and precision. Kate slipped her gloved hand through the narrow gap of the glass cabinet, whose safety electronic latch had been secretly disabled by her trusted security contacts earlier, and reached in to touch the red velvet lining beneath the fake necklace. Kate's eyes focused intensely on the edge of the pedestal, the exact spot where the culprit had to use their bare hands to press the item down to create deceptive folds, arranging the chain into a perfect position to trick the palace inspectors. She firmly pressed the flexible adhesive strip onto the dark red velvet, using her thumb to apply a strong, decisive pressure before quickly peeling it back up, revealing a faint imprint clinging to the transparent film, a complete fingerprint clearly showing the spiral ridges of the person who had directly executed the switch. They quietly and swiftly retreated from the exhibition hall, and just 15 minutes later, in a darkened security control room in the isolated East Wing, Kate placed the adhesive tape on the surface of a portable high-definition fingerprint scanner connected directly to the Royal Internal Biometric Database. A green laser beam swept across the tape, digitizing every single groove of the extracted fingerprint, and the software began to run a massive array of biometric data, flashing the profiles of anyone who had ever accessed the secure vault area across the bright monitor. A soft mechanical beep echoed through the small room, signaling that the scanning process was complete, and the tablet screen flashed brightly to reveal a 100% match, displaying the name Laura Lopes clearly and sharply, shattering all remaining doubts. Kate looked up at and the princess nodded slowly, her face completely frozen now, looking as cold as a 1,000-year-old iceberg because the one who directly committed the crime had been fully exposed. All the filthy pieces of the puzzle had been brought to light, but the real evidence, the historical treasure itself, was still floating outside the safe bounds of the palace, and they knew they would not report the incident to the regular police or hold any discussions with the government. They would hunt it down themselves, tracking it straight to the den of greed, and crush this filth using the hardest physical evidence caught right in her hands. The morning fog was still incredibly thick, completely blanketing the private driveways around Laura Lopes' secluded mansion when an expensive silver sports car rolled out of the heavy iron gate, its tires crunching loudly on the wet gravel road. Laura sat behind the wheel, her eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror with paranoia, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as she accelerated hastily toward the highway, on her way to execute the final step of turning the sacred treasure into untraceable cash. But Laura had absolutely no idea that right under her car's chassis, hidden near the exhaust pipe billowing white smoke, a micro GPS tracker, thin and flat as a coin, had been personally attached by Kate during the dead of night. 3 blocks away, completely cloaked in the cold autumn fog, a matte black armored SUV pursued her silently, with no sirens and no flashing lights, moving like a lethal ghost tailing its unaware prey. Princess Anne personally held the steering wheel, her eyes pinned to the red, flashing and moving constantly on the digital map displayed on the center console, while sitting in the passenger seat was William, Prince of Wales. The truth about this filthy theft, this total trampling of his late grandmother's legacy, had pushed his endurance to its absolute limit, and William's entire body was incredibly tense, his face hardened, and his jaw clenched so tight the facial bones protruded sharply. His right hand gripped the handle above the door, his knuckles turning completely white from the force, and the atmosphere inside the SUV was thick with a heavy mixture of fury, coldness, and murderous intent. He would not let any greedy outsider siphon off the family's historic material assets, especially when that fortune by right of blood belonged to the future of his own children. The red on the screen suddenly veered away from the bustling center of London, heading straight for an abandoned mechanical industrial zone in the desolate suburbs, where Laura's sports car slowed down, tore through the overgrown weeds, and stopped in front of a rusty corrugated iron warehouse. This was a perfect, cheap, and filthy cover for an underground illegal gem workshop specializing in fencing stolen high-value goods, and Laura grabbed the large black bag, hurriedly pushed open the heavy iron door, and stepped inside, letting the metal latch clang loudly as it locked from the interior. And did not break abruptly. She slowly and masterfully glided the heavy SUV past the rusted iron gate and pulled into a hidden corner entirely concealed behind a row of dead trees. The car key was turned off, the powerful engine fell silent, and William turned to the back, signaling the 4 elite royal bodyguards dressed in black civilian clothes who were sitting silently in the 3rd row. Without uttering a single word, the 4 dark figures instantly opened the car doors, fanning out in 4 different directions, completely surrounding and barricading every single exit, window, and corner of the old warehouse. They didn't need the regular police, and they didn't need Scotland Yard's handcuffs because this filthy affair would be decisively resolved by the supreme authority and physical suppression of the true royal family. In the rearmost seat, Princess Kate quietly unzipped her specialized equipment case, pulling out a micro-stealth drone that was barely larger than a honeybee, its entire body coated in light-absorbing matte black paint, and its advanced propeller system emitted absolutely no engine noise. With a quick swipe on her control screen, the drone soared out of the slightly opened car window, hugged the rusty, moss-covered drainage pipe on the side of the warehouse, and maneuvered skillfully, squeezing through a narrow, torn ventilation slit on the tin roof. The live footage from the micro camera was instantly transmitted to the glowing screen in the dark interior of the SUV, showing an incredibly sharp image that zoomed in on every angular detail inside the dilapidated room, whose dirt floor was covered in metal shavings and black grease. Laura Lopes stood before a sturdy wooden work table clamped with heavy steel vices and crude tools, reaching into her black bag to pull out the original Belgian sapphire necklace. Under the flickering yellowish incandescent light of the mechanical workshop, the solid white gold and the brilliant gemstones shone blindingly, standing in deeply ironic and heartbreaking contrast to the filthy surroundings as the sacred treasure was about to be placed on a literal butcher's chopping block. Laura hastily took off her cumbersome winter jacket, tossing it aside carelessly, before reaching into a nearby metal toolbox and grabbing a specialized heavy-duty metal bolt cutter with incredibly sharp jaws, her eyes gleaming with extreme greed. Laura aimed the cold steel jaws straight at the delicate white gold frame clutching the largest sapphire at the exact center of the pendant, opening the jaws wide as she prepared to apply massive physical pressure to snap and completely destroy the original structure of the sacred treasure. She wanted to dismantle every single gemstone to easily crush them, erase their historical origins, and fence them on the black market for quick cash. The steel jaws touched the solid white gold, and just one more squeeze would mean the 1,000-year heritage would be severed and shattered forever by the extreme greed of an outsider. In the airtight space of the SUV, William gripped the door handle, his biceps bulging with rage, while Anne's eyes flashed with the fire of brutal retribution as her finger rested on the door release latch because the time to strike had finally come, and the thieves would never get the chance to crush this legacy. Inside the dimly lit and dilapidated mechanical workshop, the razor-sharp cold steel jaws of Laura Lopes' heavy-duty bolt cutters were pressed tightly against the delicate white gold frame enclosing the central sapphire. She frowned deeply, putting all her physical strength into her wrists, squeezing hard on the long handles of the bolt cutters as sweat rolled down her face. Just 1 more millimeter of pressure and the solid molecular structure of the 1,000-year royal treasure would shatter forever, but she would never get the chance to do that. The rusty iron door of the warehouse was suddenly kicked open with a violent, explosive force from the outside. The old hinges snapped completely, slamming the metal sheet hard against the corrugated tin wall with a deafening crash. 4 royal bodyguards dressed in matching matte black tactical civilian uniforms burst into the room like lethal ghosts, moving with absolute combat speed and flawless coordination. 2 guards rushed straight to the sturdy wooden work table, violently sweeping all the crude mechanical tools and grease-soaked oil cans onto the hard floor. The other 2 guards closed in on Laura from both sides, cutting off any possible path of retreat. Laura jumped completely out of her skin, dropping the heavy metal bolt cutters to the ground as she panicked. Shaking with fear, she blindly snatched the sapphire necklace from the table, intending to hide it inside her open handbag, but a hand as solid and unyielding as tempered steel gripped her wrist tightly. Princess Anne stepped in, the sharp click of her heels striking the filthy workshop floor, carrying a terrifying sense of sheer authority. She squeezed Laura's wrist with an iron grip, twisting it sharply behind her back in one fluid motion. The sudden, intense pain forced Laura's fingers to instantly go slack, and the dazzling royal treasure dropped straight onto a soft red velvet tray that another bodyguard had quickly held out to catch it. "Don't you dare touch your filthy, greedy hands on my mother's personal belongings," and ground out each word slowly, her voice carrying the bone-chilling cold of absolute retribution. She violently yanked Laura's arm one more time, pushing her straight down to her knees on the hard dirt floor covered in sharp iron shavings. At that exact historical moment, Prince William stepped through the ruined doorway, the Prince of Wales's face completely hardened into a mask of pure rage, his eyes burning with an uncontainable fire of fury. He bent down slightly, deliberately stomping the heavy heel of his boot onto the metal bolt cutters, crushing the tool against the concrete floor. The air inside the mechanical workshop thickened instantly, making it hard to breathe. Laura trembled violently from head to toe, clutching her aching twisted arm, her mouth stammering incoherently as she tried to voice a desperate denial, claiming she only brought the historic items here to be professionally cleaned. But at that very second, the smartphone lying face up on Laura's cluttered wooden table suddenly vibrated violently, its bright screen lighting up the dark room, displaying the caller ID as Mom. Princess Kate, stepping out from a hidden, strategic spot near the broken door, swiftly steered the advanced stealth micro-drone to hover right above the vibrating phone. She pressed a designated button on her digital control tablet, and the drone's micro-mechanical arm dropped down perfectly, swiping right across the screen to accept the incoming call while instantly activating the loud speakerphone function. The shrill, sharp, and intensely impatient voice of Queen Consort Camilla immediately echoed off the 4 cold walls of the torn mechanical workshop. "Laura, answer me. Have you crushed them into unrecognizable pieces yet? Do it quickly. Those individual stones are more than enough to completely wipe out your damn underworld debts. I have personally cleaned up the entire security scene back in the vault, so no one in this palace is ever going to find out. The necklace on display right now is just a cheap glass fake. Smash them now and bring the cash back to me immediately." Every single lie, every proud royal facade, and every arrogant cover-up was stripped bare, exposed brazenly in front of the true heirs. Laura looked up with wide, terrified eyes at William and Anne, realizing there was absolutely no way out, no logical explanation left to save her. The crystal-clear digital audio recording from the phone's speakerphone had been permanently backed up by Kate's security system. Combined with the high-definition aerial footage of her holding the heavy cutters, preparing to physically destroy the treasure, they had everything. The physical evidence, the culprit caught in the exact act of destruction, and the mastermind caught talking on the other end of the line. Everything had been permanently nailed into the filthiest frame. William turned his back coldly, signaling the silent bodyguards to slap the heavy metal handcuffs directly onto Laura's trembling wrists, and carefully locked the velvet tray containing the real, recovered sapphires inside a secure briefcase. The trap had been successfully sprung, the net had been cast, and now it was finally time to drag the high-profile parasites out into the blinding light of public disgrace. Meanwhile, the Grand Autumn Royal Gala was still proceeding in a breathtakingly extravagant and joyful atmosphere inside the main hall of Buckingham Palace. Camilla, entirely unaware of the catastrophic disaster that had just struck her daughter in the suburbs, was still mingling proudly among the international aristocratic guests. She raised her sparkling champagne glass high, smiling contentedly as she received endless flattering remarks about the majestic Belgian sapphire tiara sitting on her head and the fake necklace sitting inside the heavy glass cabinet. She was currently at the absolute pinnacle of her arrogance, genuinely believing she had permanently erased the lingering shadow of the late queen from the monarchy. But true power does not reside in superficial flattery or stolen crowns. Suddenly, without warning, the entire surround sound audio system of the Grand Hall let out a high-frequency, ear-piercing screech. Hundreds of distinguished guests went simultaneously, covering their ears in confusion, and immediately after, all the giant crystal chandeliers went completely dark at the same time. Thick darkness engulfed the massive hall, cutting off the loud chatter and replacing it with a terrifying, heavy silence. From the high mezzanine area, a beam of ultra-high-power projector light, sharp and focused as a laser blade, tore through the darkness, shining straight onto the largest central patterned wall of the Grand Hall. A giant video projection appeared, crisp and clear down to every single pixel. It showed the raw image of Laura Lopes standing inside the dilapidated mechanical workshop, gripping the heavy iron cutters aimed straight at the priceless Belgian sapphire necklace. The elite guests gasped in collective shock, and then, the advanced sound system amplified the entire recorded telephone conversation to maximum volume, letting it boom through the architecture. Camilla's sharp, demanding voice slammed hard into the eardrums of everyone present. Have you crushed them into pieces yet? Those stones are enough to wipe out your damn debts. No one is going to find out the necklace on display is a fake. All eyes instantly converged on the isolated display cabinet in the middle of the hall, where the sudden darkness highlighted the cloudy, cheap, and lifeless flaw of the artificial glass block beneath the display lights. Hundreds of panicked and disgusted gasps erupted from the crowd. The elite aristocratic crowd automatically backed away to both sides like avoiding a deadly plague, leaving a wide, completely empty space right in the center of the hall. Camilla stood isolated in that exact center position, her mask of pride shattered into a million pieces instantly. Her face sagged completely, turning ashen and pale like a corpse, as her expensive makeup could not hide the extreme panic spreading across her features. She stumbled backward blindly, her hands clutching the hem of her expensive evening gown, her mouth gaping open but completely unable to utter a single word of defense or denial. The ultimate crime of stealing the dynasty's historical treasure and planning to sell it cheap to pay off her stepdaughter's illegal debts was exposed directly, ruthlessly, and undeniably before the entire high society. Suddenly, a high-intensity spotlight flicked on, illuminating Camilla directly, and from the main grand doors of the hall, William and Princess entered with immense power. William's eyes blazed with wrathful indignation as he took long, decisive strides straight toward the trembling woman, and walked right beside him, her hands holding the bright red velvet tray, on which the original, authentic sapphire necklace shone brilliantly under the light, completely outshining the cheap glass block sitting nearby. The physical evidence had officially returned, and the verdict had been delivered. The side security doors of the hall burst open, and the special royal bodyguard force escorted a sobbing Laura Lopes directly into the middle of the crowd. She no longer wore her expensive designer dress or her usual arrogant demeanor. Her arms were twisted firmly behind her back, locked tight by cold steel handcuffs. Laura wailed loudly, tears blurring her smudged face as she writhed and struggled, trying desperately to reach toward her mother for help. The harsh sound of the iron chains scraping against each other echoed coldly through the silent room, striking a direct physical blow to the arrogance of the outsiders. Camilla was in an absolute state of panic, completely losing all her remaining royal dignity. Staggering blindly toward King Charles, who stood a few paces away looking completely stunned, she reached out her hands, trying to grab the king's formal sleeve, hoping for one last blind act of protection. But Charles violently and disgustedly swatted her hand away, his eyes filled with absolute loathing at the sight of the swapped fake treasure and the crystal-clear audio tape. He turned his back on her coldly, walking straight out of the grand hall without looking back once, leaving the traitor to her absolute punishment. With no one left to protect her, Camilla collapsed entirely onto her knees. William stepped right up to her face, and with a brutal, swift, and uncompromising motion, he reached up, grabbed the solid frame of the Belgian sapphire tiara on Camilla's head, and violently ripped it off. Her neatly bunned hair unraveled instantly, falling in complete disarray around her face. The tiara, the ultimate symbol of power she had stolen from his grandmother, was ruthlessly stripped away by sheer physical force. William threw the historic tiara straight into the hands of a bodyguard standing nearby, before jerking his chin forward in a commanding signal. Immediately, two burly members of the elite guard unit closed in on Camilla, clamping both of her arms with the painful, gripping force of iron tongs. They dragged the crying, screaming woman out of the grand hall across the floor. Both Camilla and Laura were shoved straight into the back of a windowless security van waiting with its engine running outside, thrown directly out of the palace gates that very night. The humiliating disgrace was laid bare before the witnessing and disdainful eyes of hundreds of aristocrats, and the thieves had permanently lost everything. The grand hall gradually sank back into a solemn, pure silence. Princess Kate walked over to Princess Anne, gently receiving the velvet tray containing the original Belgian sapphire necklace, and then she bent down to eye level with young Princess Charlotte. The 10-year-old girl stood silently, observing everything with calm, mature eyes. Charlotte carried within her the purest bloodline of the dynasty, making her the fully deserving future heir of this great legacy. Kate carefully lifted the priceless sapphire necklace, placed it around her daughter's tiny neck, and securely fastened the golden clasp. The deep, brilliant blue gems embraced Charlotte's neck, sparkling with immortal pride, justice, and true royal authority. The sacred fortune had been successfully passed down to its rightful bloodline owner, completely smashing the filthy designs of the parasites. The internal enemies had been decisively expelled, and iron and blood justice had been fully restored to the monarchy. Share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more exclusive royal updates, and also click the next video showing on your screen right now, as you will definitely enjoy it.